Today I will be doing my 15-minute presentation about the issue I chose um, for these three cases. The issue I chose was the poor decision making, budgeting and forecasting skills by these three companies. For Ministry of Social Development, for the issue of these three cases, I believe that a similar issue that arises would be the incorrect and lack of skill of forecasting, budgeting, and decision making, either in the centralized or decentralized system. Without an accurate, careful, and realistic forecast, the company would waste a lot of resources, time, and money for a project that will eventually occur a loss. Ministry of Social Development changes focus from transactional output efficiency to social development outcomes was a major change and a good change for MSD, as MSD Chief Executive Peter Hughes said, what the government is interested in is what the citizens are interested in, which are outcomes, improving their lives and being able to get on with their lives. The problem with the shift in focus was that Peter Hughes did not think through every aspect and requirements for this change. It was said that for this change, every aspect of the business would need to be recalibrated. MSD is governed using a decentralized decision-making system, which means the management or lower levels of employees will have authorities for decision-making. But for an outcome focus, the top board of directors and chief executives must be in full control and only focus on the core top-line decisions of the business. They have no time with the bottom-line problems. Some few changes include that the ministry now needs to provide both social investments and social protection for the people in difficulty. The social development required MSD to include both the people's underlying causes and problems to avoid them entering the benefit system. So MSD not only have to provide benefit for struggling families, but now they also have to help them find a stable job and prevent them from re-entering the unemployed. Another issue with the change to outcomes was that MSD remodeled their management system, but that eventually turned into a performance issue. They developed effective models responding to issues of funding, but these models often sat outside the formal accountability framework. Hughes even said a greater problem he saw that the financing system encouraged short-term type thinking, not a medium to long-term outcome focus, which the organization was aimed at. For changing a new focus to social development outcomes, the results must be easily measurable and seen to obtain results of performance and present reliable information to the public. But this was not the case, as most figures often did not reflect actual performance. CEO Hughes said that measuring outcomes is very hard, almost impossible to do at an individual level, as stated under the Public Finance Act that no one can be held accountable for an outcome. To effectively measure feedback, MSD appointed regional social policy advisors that developed ways for policy and delivery to work together, and it allowed them to input into the policy process and give feedback on what works and what is needed. The second case is the Sydney Cross City Tunnel. The Sydney Cross City Tunnel project was bid and won by Cheung Kong Infrastructure Holdings Limited, also known as CKI. CKI was one of the leading infrastructure sectors in China and Hong Kong with a well-diversified portfolio of investments. CKI bid and won the project with its major business partner AG. AG was one of the world's leading construction companies with global operations in civil engineering and real estate. Both these companies formed the CCM Consortium with financing from major banks around the world. But even with a well-known reputation of CKI and AG, a huge mistake in budget and forecast for the project leads the two companies to a huge potential impairment loss in the future. A major mistake in the budget decision-making happened when CCM was preparing to submit a detailed proposal showing the design, construction, and operation of the CCT. CCM focused their bid on the business consideration fee, which was the excess revenue over costs that could be attributed to potential areas in the project, which was in total of 100.1 million Australian dollars. CCM knew that the objective of delivering this project was at no cost to government, so they thought the consideration fee would meet the objectives of the government. Because there was no requirement in the proposal to meet all conditions set by the RTA, CCM made a huge change in the project with hopes of maximum returns to recover the business consideration fee. CCM then therefore increased the length of the tunnel by 300 meters and the depth by 30 meters. This will increase the traffic through the tunnel by 17,000 more vehicles than expected that they forecasted, but this will also mean that the total budget construction cost would be 680 million Australian dollars. CCM valued the project that the revenue will be generated by the traffic volume going through the toll charges. They considered toll charges to be around $2 to $8, including casual use vehicles. CCM also believed that the toll charges should be increased in line with inflation, so they introduced this toll escalation scheme with interest that it would help recover the business consideration fee. CCM therefore went and prepared a traffic estimate with advice from Hyder Consulting projecting that the CTT would be used by over 90,000 vehicles per day and can earn additional revenue of 10 million Australian dollars per year. The projected extra revenue will be used for public transport, pedestrians, cyclists, and other improvements. The project outcomes turned out to be CKI's worst nightmare. Because of a poor decision making and budgeting skills, the recently opened CCT had such a low volume of traffic, around 30,000 vehicles a day, well short of projected 90,000 vehicles. This was due to many road users believed that the toll charges were too high for such a short distance to travel and would rather use alternative roads. Even the toll-free periods and freeze on toll increases was announced. The CCT tunnel did not improve and was operating at roughly one third of projected throughput. Due to CCM's projection method of a work-back process, which the projections were based from an internal rate of return promised to equity investors, CCM had failed to consider land use and transport interactions factors properly. In 2006, the CCT was for sale at a rumoured price of 1 billion Australian dollars, but the government took over after receivership. This showed that even the best and well-known company like CKI and AG can make stupid mistakes in decision making, budgeting, and forecasting. Too eager for revenue and recover fees and costs will lead to mistakes like this, which will give them a huge liability and cause them a huge impairment loss in the future. The last case is ACHS, Asociación Chilena de Seguridad, also known as ACHS, had also had a good strategy to work in the present while planning for the future. Because of its efficient management and governance practice, unfortunately this had led to a problem for ACHS. Due to its strong competitive advantage in Chile, with 50% of the market with the help of 1968 law, ACHS had become the largest health service provider for occupational accidents and illnesses in Chile. Its infrastructure included 7 hospitals, 27 clinics, and 70 medical centers. But because of these infrastructures just in the provinces, it had led to excess hospital capacity. This meant that ACHS had to find a way to reduce maintenance costs, and the way ACHS CEO Harriman decided was to engage in an alliance with its main second-place competitor MSCCC. The alliance of ACHS and MSCCC will provide lower costs, stop duplication of investments, and a wider range of medical services and for workers and the community at large by sharing medical infrastructure. Because of ACH's poor decision making and budgeting for the long term, its efficient work in the short term had led them to, with no choice, of joining with their main competitor of a 50-50% ownership. An executive had said that they have struggled for decades to differentiate themselves from MSCCC and other competitors, and is very worried about that they might risk losing what they have struggled so hard to build. ACHS has always had a low employee turnover, with a permanence of 23 years on average. But if the alliance was successful, there had to be a huge reduction in workers to operate just one hospital. ACHS believe that in the long run, employment will increase, but in the short term, well, in this situation, they had to fire 75% of the employees working in the hospital. Again, because of the high success in efficient governance and management processes, ACHS had not focused on foresee on a threat that can be described as a paradox of success. The more successful and efficient of prevention and cure to their patients had led to less injuries and illnesses in the work-related areas, which also meant there was less profit coming into the company. Even though ACHS is a non-for-profit company, the profits are still reinvested into projects to grow the company. ACHS has been successful in its operations with a strong competitive advantage, lowering accidents and illnesses in Chile and building a strong employment team. But even a small mistake of not foreseeing, forecasting, and budgeting properly, they will easily give the competitive advantage they work so hard for away to other competitors. On the last part, I'll talk about what I've learned about governance and accounting, and as they have to do with accounting, governance and management, what they have to do with accounting. Well, governance and management is the key to a well-organized and functional organization. What I have learned in the past 4 weeks is that there is a major difference in governance and management, and it's very important for these two groups to work together to achieve organizational objectives. Governance can be said to be the policy, guidelines, tasks, and long-term goals set out by the owners or the interest group of people who represent the company. Governance consists of a governing body in which directs the management on all aspects of the company. It is the governing body that oversees the overall function of the organization. Governance responsibility include choosing top executives, authorizing plans, evaluating organizational performances. It sets the right policy and procedures to ensure that things are done in the proper and legal way. Management, on the other hand, can be said to be the organization's day-to-day operations that need to be carried out and the resources that need to be allocated. Management has the responsibility to follow the firm's policies set out by the governing bodies and implement them in everyday activities. Management is normally a short-term focus, which can include setting of budgets and making strategic plans. Organizations that work governance and management together can enhance revenue, their reputation, brand protection, lower their costs, and other attributes of an effectively ran business. The accounting standards and policy in different organizations depends on what kind and what size of the organizations it may be, including for-profit, not-for-profit, public or private, and so on. Accounting also describes how the company is functioning, which discloses information needed for public investments opportunities, including organizational long-term sustainability goals. Public Finance Act states that no one can be held accountable for an outcome, which says that accountability will be shared across the whole organization. Accounting financial statements of organizations can be easily manipulated to make the organization look better for investors and its competitors. That's why there are standards and legislation set out to make sure that the performance is true and fair. Ultimately, the organization's governance and management performance is all reflected in its financial statements, which are the most important information for the public.